Honda versus Rossi. By 2003, Valentino Rossi was not just winning, he was redefining MotoGP. He had already delivered back-to-back titles with Honda, making the RC211V the most dominant machine on the grid. To outsiders, Honda seemed unstoppable. They had the best bike, the best engineers, and the best rider. But behind closed doors, Honda's corporate culture carried a dangerous arrogance. Honda executives believed their engineering was the true star, not the rider. They openly suggested that anyone could win on the RC211V, undermining Rossi's role. To a man obsessed with proving rider superiority over machine, those words cut deep. Meetings became tense. Rossi's detailed feedback on chassis balance, throttle response, and braking stability was often brushed aside. Honda engineers acted as if the machine's design was flawless, unwilling to credit the rider's craft for its success. The turning point came when Rossi realized he wasn't just another employee, he was being treated as expendable. Honda wanted to lock him into a strict contract where he had little say in development direction. For a fiercely independent competitor like Rossi, this was suffocating. The arrogance was so blind that Honda executives didn't believe he would ever leave. They thought Rossi needed them more than they needed him. But in late 2003, Rossi made a decision that would change MotoGP forever. He walked away. He signed with Yamaha, a team struggling at the back with an underpowered M1. Many thought it was career suicide, but when Rossi won on debut in 2004, beating Honda with an inferior bike, it wasn't just a victory, it was revenge. Honda's arrogance had backfired spectacularly, creating the single most famous defection in MotoGP history. Stoner's early exit, Casey Stoner, was a phenomenon. A rider who could take a notoriously unstable Ducati, one that broke other riders, and bend it to his will, winning the 2007 World Championship against all odds. When he moved to Honda in 2011, he proved it wasn't a fluke. He dominated immediately, winning the title in his very first year with the RC213V. Stoner was at the peak of his powers, feared by rivals and respected by engineers who called him the most naturally gifted rider of his generation. And then, just 1 year later, he dropped a bombshell: retirement at the age of 27. The paddock was stunned. Why would a reigning champion, still in his prime, walk away? Stoner cited fatigue, frustration with MotoGP politics, and a desire to spend more time with his young family. He was tired of the constant battles off track, rule changes he didn't believe in, a sport he felt was losing its purity. For fans, it felt like MotoGP had been robbed of a decade of greatness. The consequences were seismic. Honda lost their golden weapon just as Marquez was waiting in the wings. Rossi, Lorenzo, and Pedrosa were spared the torment of facing Stoner at his absolute peak year after year. And Stoner himself, he became a ghost of what might have been. Some believe he could have gone on to win 5, maybe 6 championships if he stayed. Instead, his career ended abruptly, leaving behind a legacy of brilliance, but also one of the biggest what-ifs in MotoGP history. Michelin's tire fiasco. The 2009 Catalan Grand Prix is remembered for one of the greatest last-lap battles in MotoGP history between Rossi and Lorenzo, but hidden behind the spectacle was one of the sport's biggest supplier failures: Michelin's tire disaster. By 2009, the sport had switched to a single-tire supplier model, ending the intense Bridgestone versus Michelin rivalry. But Catalunya exposed just how dangerous that reliance could be. During the race weekend, riders complained that the Michelin compounds were overheating and blistering under the track's high temperatures. The tires weren't just losing grip, they were disintegrating mid-race. Several riders, including big names like Dani Pedrosa and Andrea Dovizioso, suffered terrifying handling problems. Pedrosa's front tire degraded so quickly, he was forced to limp home with no chance of competing. Dovizioso later described the experience as like racing on ice. Riders reported massive drops in lap times, sliding uncontrollably through corners, with no way to fight back. The issue wasn't minor, it was systemic. Michelin had miscalculated the demands of Catalunya's abrasive surface combined with the heat, bringing compounds that simply weren't fit for the conditions. As a result, only a handful of riders had tires capable of performing consistently. It turned the race into a lottery. Rossi and Lorenzo, both on the best preserved sets, fought an epic duel, while others struggled just to stay upright. The fallout was brutal. Michelin's credibility took a massive hit. In the paddock, whispers spread that MotoGP was risking its reputation by allowing one company so much control over competition. Within a few seasons, the single supplier model was reshuffled and stricter quality control was demanded. Catalunya 2000 2009 remains a cautionary tale of how one tire failure can not only ruin a race, but shake the trust of an entire championship. Lorenzo's Ducati disaster. In 2016, Jorge Lorenzo made a decision that stunned the paddock. He was leaving Yamaha, the team where he had become a three-time world champion, to join Ducati. On paper, it was bold. Ducati had money, power, and a hunger to return to dominance. But reality proved brutal. Ducati's bike was notoriously difficult, wild on acceleration, stubborn in corners, and built for a completely different riding style. Lorenzo, known for his smooth, flowing lines, suddenly found himself wrestling a machine that demanded aggression and brute force. The adaptation curve was steep. The first races in 2017 painted an ugly picture. Lorenzo was finishing outside the top 10, miles off the pace of both Marquez and his old teammate Rossi. For a rider with his ego and resume, it was humiliating. Ducati had gambled millions on him, but the results weren't coming. Critics tore into him, branding the move the beginning of his downfall. It took over a year before he finally clicked with the Ducati, winning in Mugello and Catalunya in 2018. But by then, the damage was done. Ducati had already lost patience and signed Danilo Petrucci to replace him. Lorenzo's resurgence came too late, and in a cruel twist, he left Ducati just as he had learned to master the beast. What was meant to be a career-defining move ended up fracturing his reputation and set him on a decline that he never recovered from. That decision, to walk away from Yamaha for Ducati, remains one of MotoGP's most infamous career miscalculations. Suzuki's sudden quit. Suzuki's departure from MotoGP in 2022 blindsided the sport. Only 2 years earlier, they had reached the pinnacle. Joan Mir winning the 2020 World Championship, a feat no one saw coming. Suzuki's GSX-RR was praised as the most balanced machine on the grid. Their rider lineup of Mir and Alex Rins was competitive, loyal, and hungry. The team had momentum, prestige, and the fans behind them. Then, out of nowhere, came the announcement. Suzuki was quitting MotoGP at the end of 2022. Even riders found out through leaked news before being told face-to-face. The justification? Financial strain, corporate restructuring, shifting focus to sustainability projects. But to the paddock, it felt like betrayal. A factory that had just proven it could beat giants like Yamaha, Honda, and Ducati was walking away at its peak. The fallout was immense. Riders were left scrambling for seats. Engineers, mechanics, and staff suddenly unemployed after building a championship-winning project. Fans were furious. Mir and Rins felt abandoned, their careers disrupted. Many believed Suzuki had killed off one of MotoGP's most compelling stories, an underdog giant that had risen again, just when it was becoming part of the sport's future. To this day, insiders whisper that the true reason wasn't just money. Some point to internal politics in Japan, a lack of corporate will, and an unwillingness to commit long-term budgets to racing. Whatever the motive, Suzuki's exit in 2022 stands as one of the darkest and most senseless corporate decisions in MotoGP history. It was not just the end of a team, it was the end of hope for countless fans who believed they had found their modern David to stand against Goliaths like Honda and Ducati. Rossi's Ducati flop. When Rossi left Yamaha after 2 titles with Jorge Lorenzo as teammate, the world expected fireworks when he joined Ducati in 2011. It was the perfect story. Italy's greatest rider teaming with Italy's beloved manufacturer. Fans imagined a modern-day Ferrari Schumacher dynasty in MotoGP form, but the reality turned into a nightmare. The Ducati Desmosedici was already notorious for destroying careers. Its carbon fiber chassis, stiff front end, and violent handling made it nearly impossible to master. Riders like Marco Melandri and Seth Gibernau had left humiliated after failed stints. Rossi, along with his legendary crew chief Jeremy Burgess, thought they could tame the beast. But Ducati's engineers were stubborn. They believed in their radical design philosophy and resisted Rossi's demands for change. Race after race, the frustration grew. Rossi fought the front end like it was made of stone, constantly washing out mid-corner. His braking style didn't suit the rigid chassis, and acceleration felt like riding a bucking bronco rather than a race machine. He begged Ducati to switch to an aluminum frame, the standard across MotoGP. Ducati refused, insisting their carbon solution would prove superior if only Rossi adapted. The results were catastrophic for his legacy. Across 2 years, Rossi managed just 3 podium finishes, often finishing outside the top 5 and sometimes barely scraping into the top 10. Fans who once saw him as untouchable now watched in disbelief as he battled midfield riders he used to lap. The dream Italian marriage had turned toxic. By 2013, Rossi knew the gamble had failed. He quietly returned to Yamaha, admitting defeat. Ducati's arrogance, that Rossi's talent alone could bend physics, ended up embarrassing both sides. For Rossi, it was the darkest chapter of his career. For Ducati, it was proof that their philosophy needed tearing down before real progress could be made. Only after years of restructuring did Ducati recover, but the scar of the Rossi era still lingers as one of MotoGP's most infamous failures. Vinales-Yamaha split. Maverick Vinales arrived at Yamaha in 2017 as the next big thing. He was fast, fearless, and immediately won races, even leading the championship early that year. Many thought he was destined to be the man to carry Yamaha after Rossi. But behind the scenes, the cracks began to show. Vinales struggled with consistency. One weekend, he looked untouchable. The next, he was invisible in the midfield. He blamed the Yamaha for its unpredictability, and Yamaha, in turn, grew frustrated with his demands and mood swings. By 2021, the relationship collapsed. After a string of poor results, Vinales' frustration boiled over. In one shocking twist, Yamaha accused him of deliberately trying to damage the bike's engine during a race in Austria. It was unheard of. A factory accusing its own rider of sabotage. Vinales was immediately suspended, a humiliating exit for a rider once billed as their future star. The fallout was ugly. Vinales broke ties with Yamaha mid-season, joining Aprilia in desperation. Yamaha's reputation took a hit too, criticized for mishandling yet another rider relationship after years of internal drama with Rossi and Lorenzo. What should have been a golden era became a cautionary tale of how mismanagement, broken trust, and personal ego can implode even the most promising of careers. For Vinales, the move to Aprilia gave him a fresh start, but the shadow of that ugly split still follows him. For Yamaha, it was yet another chapter in a long-running saga of failing to manage their riders, and another brutal reminder of how quickly things can fall apart in MotoGP.